Google Hangout for the International Day of Happiness to get us going on a full day of happiness in and around the UN, in and around New York, and in and around the world as we kick off and get it started. I'm Rob Skinner with the United Nations Foundation. My good friend and colleague Zain Habu is joining me, who is also with the UN Foundation, and Tracy Racek from the UN Secretary General's Climate Change Team is joining us as well from UN headquarters. International Day of Happiness kicked off for the first time in 2012 with a General Assembly resolution. So International Day of Happiness is an official United Nations day. It was a day that was instigated by the country of Bhutan, which has a happiness index and focuses very much on happiness, and was voted on by the General Assembly in 2012, and has been had incredible pickup across all the membership of the United Nations, as well as the United Nations staff and team and the Secretary General throughout the United Nations. In fact, to such a degree that the Secretary General Ban has taken on the day in a big way, and including with this quote from the Secretary General: "The is serious happiness for the entire human family is one of the main goals of the United Nations." Interesting is that I think the United Nations is constantly working on the world's most difficult issues, difficult problems, from peace and security, terrorism, hunger, shelter, emergencies, crises all over the world. But I think the one thing that those of us who have worked with the United Nations in New York, in the world, and seen different places is that the one thing that we know is common among all people, no matter where, is that people do want to be happy. And no matter what they're trying to overcome in their circumstances, the pursuit of happiness is certainly a huge part of what they're trying to do as they, take care of their families, take care of their communities, and trying to make the world a better place, whether that's in small areas or around the globe. And so we're really pleased from the United Nations Foundation to be a part of today's activities and events, as I said, at the UN, but also all around the world. And so first I'd like to turn to my colleague, Zain, who has been working over the past year and a half since we first started working with Pharrell Williams and his team to put the International Day of Happiness activities together. So Zain, could you just tell us a little bit about how this process has come together, how we put together the partners, and how this came together, starting really from about a little over a year ago when we first celebrated International Day of Happiness with Pharrell and his team and the other partners.
Absolutely. Thank you for the introduction, Rob, and hi, Tracy, and thank you, UN Foundation, for having us. And also, hashtag Happy Day, hashtag Happy Planet, and hashtag Happy Sounds Like, the hashtags that both the UN Foundation, Pharrell Williams, Google, and the United Nations will be using today, so please join in. We've made it as big as possible so that anybody can participate. I wanted to say that we are so excited at the UN Foundation, as always, to be able to support and partner with the United Nations on any initiative, but especially one as positive as the International Day of Happiness. About a year and a half ago, we were approached by the UN and Pharrell Williams' team wanting to talk about a way to leverage the successful Grammy Award-winning hit, Happy, that I'm sure everybody has heard of. And so we were able to partner successfully with Sony, with YouTube, with Pharrell Williams, and the United Nations to create a surge day, if you will, on March 20th of 2014, where the world could celebrate happiness no matter what was happening. Our focus last year was on the humanitarian crisis in Syria, raising awareness and being able to connect ideas, people, and resources to the United Nations and to the Central Emergency Fund at the UN to be able to help out with the humanitarian crisis in Syria. This year, earlier in the year in January, former Vice President Al Gore and Pharrell Williams announced in Davos in Switzerland that Pharrell would be joining the Live Earth team as the creative director for the Live Earth concerts for climate action. So what we did this year was worked really closely with Pharrell Williams, with the Live Earth team, with the United Nations, and with our friends at Google to create an entire day around the International Day of Happiness focused on climate change, and the call to action being raising 1 billion voices, raising 1 billion voices, I'm sorry, to support climate action and to sign the Live Earth petition. And if you're interested in doing that, by the way, it's www.liveearth.org. We were lucky enough this year to be able to work with our friends at Google, specifically at Google Creative Labs, to create what's called the world's largest happy party. And if you go today to the Google homepage, right under the search bar, you'll see a link that takes you directly there that says International Day of Happiness Happy Party. Or you can just go to www.globalhappyparty.com, where in 4 easy steps, if you take 4 pictures, you can join thousands of people from 7 continents already in uploading their happy dance onto the internet. So please join in. This is a really important issue. We're trying to make it relatable to everyone in the world, supporting our friends at the UN, working with Google and with artist and musician Pharrell Williams for a happy day and a happy planet.
Great, thank you very much, Zane. And I think that that's, you know, as you go to the Global Happy Party site and see the various people from literally every corner of the globe participating and putting up their happy dance on there, I think you'll certainly see why people want to join and why you all should join out there, because it's a lot of fun. And, you know, even though we're dealing with a very serious issue, climate change, and focusing on climate change, you know, which is impacting everyone around the globe already, and which is the reason we're focusing on climate change as part of the International Day of Happiness this year, along with Live Earth and Google and Pharrell Williams and the entire UN community that works on all these issues, and which means really everybody in the UN system now. We think that the way to reach people and educate people and work with them is actually make it be, have it be a little bit of fun as well, because we do know that people want to be happy and they want to enjoy themselves, even if they're working on incredibly serious issues like climate change. And with that, I would like to turn to Tracy. Again, thanks for joining us, Tracy, for this Google Hangout. You totally immersed in climate change. Kind of all day, every day. That's what the Secretary General's team does. That's on the climate change issue. Tell us a little bit about your work. Why the Secretary General thinks this issue is so important, and why he has spent really so much of his tenure at the United Nations as a Secretary General focusing on climate change and trying to get the nations of the world to focus on climate change and take action.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. As you mentioned, the Secretary General absolutely prioritizes this issue, as do many other leaders in the world right now, and we have a very opportune time to address it. So I want to prioritize that message as well. As you know, the world is facing the warmest year on history. The climate change is undeniable, according to the leading scientists. So that sort of the question is off the table. We know we need to address it. And why it's such a priority for the UN in general is because it risks undermining much of the UN's general agenda, which is sustainable development, peace and security, and the other large issues that the UN is trying to address. Developing states have their challenges in front of them already, and climate change will only exacerbate all of those. That being said, it also provides an opportunity. I think what's phenomenal about this year, the previous year, and the few that are upcoming is we in a way have a convergence of opportunities at hand, and that's another reason the Secretary General has really prioritized this. Those opportunities are that the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, is re-looking at and trying to renegotiate the Kyoto Protocol for the global agreement on how the international community can tackle this issue. Simultaneous to that, the international community, the member states or the governments, the national governments, are looking at the development agenda. How can they coordinate and address sustainable development in the most efficient and universal manner possible? And so the Sustainable Development Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals are expected to be adopted in September this year as well. And those are completely linked and both very much dependent on successfully addressing climate change. So this is the Secretary General has this at the front of his mind consistently and really prioritizes the message, and there is an opportunity at hand. Simultaneously, I want to mention that other actors, civil society, as you know, really hit the streets and the people's climate march a few days before the climate summit, which was in September of 2014. Civil society has really been stepping up their contribution and their expectations of member states. Private sector also have really been coming forward and making commitments that have been outstanding for climate action as well. So again, there's sort of a convergence of both science and need and commitments to take action on this right now. So I'm actually optimistic, and I want to get back to that happiness as well. But hopefully, well, we have a theory of change about happiness being a need. It's a part of the equation that you're more likely to take action on climate change if you have if you have hope that it makes a difference as compared to fear or anger or other emotions. So there's been some studies on that. So it's not just about feeling good, it's actually more effective in climate change action.
Great, thanks, Tracy. And I couldn't agree more. If you have people have hope, people feel good, they're more likely to take action than if they're not feeling good. Could you just want to go back to some of these key dates that on the UN's calendar that people should be looking out for? What are the key dates on the development agenda as well as on the climate agenda that we should be looking for in 2015?
Sure. So in September, well, we don't want to put all of the eggs in a few baskets at the end of the year, and there's many work events on the way to the end of the year. But let me put a couple on. June 29th is the President of the General Assembly will be having a high-level event on climate change. That's quite important, and that's mid-year, so it helps to keep the momentum high and raise attention on climate change. The Sustainable Development Agenda will be adopted, and the SDGs in particular will be at a summit at the start of the General Assembly this fall. And I can't believe I'm forgetting the dates, but Rob, maybe even I think it's September 26th will be the summit of the SDGs. And then the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC negotiations, are in November through early December. And in Paris, of course, Paris COP21 it's called, so many people are very familiar with that. But those dates are all very important, but that doesn't undermine all of the smaller events that are, and workshops that are being held by a lot of partners to do the real action on the ground to make sure that these issues are addressed.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Tracy. And yeah, you're exactly right on the dates of the Sustainable Development Goals Summit, or the new set of goals for the world to tackle. Some are calling them the global goals. Those dates are September 25th, 26th, and 27th. And I think people will also be interested in knowing that on September 25th, the Pope will be participating in a session at the United Nations. So, so it brings the world even more together at the United Nations around his visit. Zane, Tracy mentioned, that there are lots of other groups, organizations, supporting the climate change agenda. That's not just about the governments that are working. And one of those organizations is the folks that have put together the Live Earth events in June. And they've been great partners and really come into this in a big way, with the link between Pharrell Williams, working on International Day of Happiness, and then also being the creative director of Live Earth. Zane, can you talk a little bit about what we'd like to see folks do as they follow the public efforts that Live Earth is putting together, as well as other people in the community that are trying to gain attention on this?
Sure. So I'll speak to Live Earth first. I think that they've been very fortunate and smart to partner with the likes of former Vice President Al Gore, as I mentioned, and Pharrell Williams, of course, people who generally are very hyper-focused on being able to use their name for good. And especially we've seen Al Gore work a lot on climate change and the environment in general. So two great names to be able to help educate and raise awareness around climate change and what kinds of actions you can take. And, Tracy, you said it so perfectly. It's very important to be positive when talking about climate change and climate action. It's not all doom and gloom. I think that a way to be able to get people to participate is through days like this. So using Google's brand to be able to upload 4 pictures online to create a happy party may sound like it doesn't necessarily result in something, except Google, that has millions and millions of followers and subscribers every day, is now telling the world, we care about climate change, you should care about climate change. Use our brand and our platform to raise awareness on an issue, and also to immediately be able to go and sign this petition to join 1 billion people in raising your voices for climate change. So that's one thing as far as the Google Live Earth and Pharrell Williams UNF UN connection, of course. Additionally, the UN has partnered with Mix Radio to be able to create a happy sounds like mixed tape, if you will, or playlist. Mixtape just showed my age, by the way, but a playlist whereby the UN has been working directly with artists like John Legend and many others to talk about Yo-Yo Ma, etc., world-renowned artists, to talk about what happy sounds like to them. And the Secretary General has also been talking about it. If you go to the United Nations Facebook page, you can see the Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, also talking about what happy sounds like to him. In that same vein, Pandora, Spotify, and others have all created playlists with the song Happy in it, or curations by famous musicians, to let the world know that there are many ways that you can hear happiness throughout the world. There's also a hashtag that you may have heard of that's really interesting called hashtag 100 Happy Days. And if you're on Instagram or Twitter, you'll see every day people in your feed posting pictures of their food or of their children or of their vacations, and they call it 100 Happy Days, and they take a challenge to only post positive things for a happy days. They approached us this year and have wanted to work with the UN Foundation and the United Nations to create the world's largest happy photo gallery. So to flood the internet, if you will, with happiness through visuals. So these are just a few examples of how others are participating. National Geographic Kids, a brand that everybody around the world knows, both in print and on digital, have created a petition for children under 18 because of COPPA compliance issues to also be able to raise their voice for climate action as well.
Great. And thanks, and you talked a lot about the digital stuff, but we're doing several things here in New York today. And, some things that, the public all over the world can follow and see happening live from New York. Could you lay out kind of the schedule of the day that we have today here in New York, so that folks know just how we're making it happen here in New York with all the partners?
Absolutely. So we are so excited. Last year was a pure digital activation. It was huge. Again, partnering with the UN, with Sony, YouTube, Pharrell Williams to create this 24-hour supercut that was purely digital, a video to the song Happy, where people from around the world danced to the video, and it was uploaded, and it was a massive digital activation. We're doing the digital activation this year. However, in New York City, we're really excited to announce that today we'll be at the Empire State Building with the UN, with the UN Foundation, with Pharrell Williams, Google, and Live Earth, where the Empire State Building will be lighting up yellow today in honor of the UN's International Day of Happiness. So that's a very big deal for us. It's a sort of worldwide monument that is going to be lighting up yellow in honor of the United Nations International Day of Happiness, so very exciting. And then later in the day, at 5 p.m. Eastern, and you can watch, I think it's untv.org. We can send this out on Twitter if you follow @UN Foundation. We will be at the United Nations in the General Assembly Hall from 5 to 6 p.m. with experts from the United Nations, with Pharrell Williams, with National Geographic explorer and resident and oceanographer Sylvia Earle, with worldwide renowned water expert Philippe Cousteau, and others, to talk about the International Day of Happiness. And the goal there is to talk to a room full of middle school students from underprivileged schools and underserved schools in the New York City area. So we're opening up the United Nations to underserved students from all over New York City on a very snowy day to be able to talk with artists and musicians and climate experts and United Nations experts, as well as our Live Earth team, to really raise awareness for climate action and talk about how happy people equal a happy planet.
It's great, yeah, and I would really encourage people to tune in and watch the live stream at www.un.org, and when you go to the UN's homepage, there is a button to click on the live stream of various different activities that are taking place in the UN, and at that time I would expect that the main button will be featuring the International Day of Happiness event in the General Assembly, with Pharrell. So please, everyone, tune into that. I think that it's going to be a fun event. I mean, I think people think of speeches and heads of state and those kinds of activities taking place in the United Nations General Assembly, which of course happens on a regular basis, particularly in September when the general debate and all the high-level activities happen in New York. But we're going to make it a fun day in the General Assembly, and I mean, I think it's just an example of how the United Nations is opening itself up to citizens of the world and making sure that citizens have voices, within what goes on in the walls of the United Nations. And so, we couldn't thank the United Nations more for participating and being a part of this and saying, okay, let's talk about the International Day of Happiness and invite Pharrell Williams and others in to celebrate it with us. So again, just an example of the UN really reaching out to communities and making sure that everyone knows about the great work that the United Nations does, and that we're hearing those voices, from all kinds of different communities about what they feel needs to be done on big issues like climate change. And along those lines, Tracy, thinking about how much this Secretary General Bond, has opened up the UN and reached out to young people, reached out to civil society, reached out to communities that may not always think of the United Nations as part of their world, and the Secretary General trying to make sure that they do think of the United Nations as being an important part of their world. What are some of the things that people can do over the course of this year, 2015, when we have these major convening summits of governments through this year, but not only through 2015, but what happens after 2015 to make sure that the action on these issues continues? What are some of the things the UN and the Secretary General are thinking about along those lines?
That's a big question. There's a lot there. So absolutely, the Secretary General really, he has a great saying, I think, which is all hands on deck. This is the year, as you mentioned, there's a lot at stake, but there's a lot of opportunities. So it really requires sort of engagement from everybody at all levels. And so that, like never before, the UN is really opening itself, I think, to civil society engagement and to private sector partnerships in new and innovative ways. I'm a fan of even the, whatever anybody can do. So there's this petition that's circulating right now, the 1 billion people rallying for the Live Earth petition to call on leaders to do what they can. If that's where your contribution can be made, that's a fantastic one. I think there's a link even today that will be circulating on the Happy and all the Happy Planet, Happy People hashtags that are going around. You can sign that petition. Local action. There's so much to be said for acting locally, and I think it's wonderful that even these New York students will be in the audience today to maybe get some inspiration on what they can be doing. Their engagement with cities is a new area of loci, which I think is quite critical. Cities are, one of the leading areas of emissions, but also the leading areas of innovation. And so everything from innovative transport, sustainable transport solutions, everything from bike lanes to public transportation, etc. Renewable energy commitments at the community level are quite interesting. You see really innovative practices where, while we're waiting for the governments to be able to come up with massive solutions at the country level, there are even communities that are figuring out how to come up with decentralized renewable energy solutions for their communities. Buying wind power or renewable energy from large service providers also, an individual commitment can really make a difference. So I want to stress the fact that the Secretary General, works at the head of the UN and works at a very global level, but we're requiring at this moment everyone to do their part, whatever that takes. And so there's a lot of opportunity right now, like never before. I think in a way we're almost inundated with opportunities, but find your niche, find your calling, and do what you can. I wanted to ask something else, because I think we have some great, yourself and Zane, who can maybe speak to the concert, the Live Earth concert, and I think it's a great opportunity to tell people about that. I'm personally excited about that coming up in June, and I didn't get to hear much about that and your wonderful tales of what's happening this year in the media world, which I'm less familiar of.
Absolutely. The Live Earth event is what we're folks to, and as I said, Pharrell is a creative director for the Live Earth concerts. Folks can go to liveearth.org and get all the details around that event, which is a key event. And again, Zane indicated, with Al Gore and Pharrell Williams, teaming up with producer of the event, Kevin Wall, and his great Live Earth team. We expect that it's going to be a significant moment for raising public awareness in the fact that it is not just a one-location event, but a 7-continent event taking place simultaneously. Really makes it going to make it a special day. And before I turn to Zane to have the last word and remind people of where they need to go and what they need to do to participate in the International Day of Happiness from wherever they might be, I did want to say that that a couple other opportunities where folks can take action. Again, this 2015 is a huge year for action on lifting people out of poverty, creating a more equal world, taking action on climate change, all of these issues that we're working on. And, today we're focusing on climate change, but, really unless we take action on climate change, we're not going to be able to lift people out of poverty. We're not going to help, create a more equal world. We're not going to create opportunities for people to live quality lives. So, that's why we think climate is so key and why we're looking at it today. And the thing that's been great this year is the fact that we're talking about action. We're not just talking about climate anymore. We're talking about taking action on climate, and that's really the key. And for those of you out there, one group and movement that is out there that the UN Foundation is very involved in and is linking with the United Nations on to make sure that we're all working together is a grouping called Action 2015, and people can find more about that at action2015.org. And currently there are 1,400 organizations from over 130 countries participating in that movement, to try to make sure that action is taken on all these issues, particularly on climate change, as well as the poverty and equality issues. So if people are looking at areas where they can join an organization and be part of this, that's a place to go. And again, it's been another way that the United Nations is working with the broad citizens and civil society movements is in that space. So with that, our Google Hangout is coming to a close, and we've been very happy to be with you. But Zane, if you could just remind us again of those hashtags and where people need to go to be participating and enjoying and just being happy with us today.
So thank you, and thank you, Rob and Tracy, for having me. The hashtags that I would encourage everybody to use today, there are 3. One is hashtag Happy Day. The other one is hashtag Happy Planet. And then the one that United Nations is using is hashtag Happy Sounds Like, which again is focused on what you think happy sounds like. What you'll see likely all over the internet today, and especially if you use the Google globalhappyparty.com website, is hashtag Happy Day and hashtag Happy Planet. Please join the UN Foundation, the United Nations, Google, and Pharrell Williams in raising your voices for climate action this year for a happy day and a happy planet. Definitely encourage everyone to hop on board. And please do check in on the unitednations.org website, where you'll be able to watch the live stream event with Pharrell Williams at the General Assembly Hall today at 5 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much for having us, and we're so excited to see you again this time next year.
That's great. Thank you so much, Zane. Thank you so much, Tracy. And also thank you to Pharrell Williams and his I Am Other team. Thank you to Live Earth for joining us and being part of this. Thank you to all of the UN team that's working with us on this. Thank you to Google for joining us in this International Day of Happiness. And thank you to the Empire State Building for lighting it up yellow for the International Day of Happiness. Have a very happy day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.